Not
Is
now.
good
Live.
good evening. Good evening and welcome to blackusa.com. And tonight we have, of course, our show Sistabiz, and we are here with my lovely host, Tamara.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show tonight. We've got a lot of great panel lined up to have a very in-depth discussion. This is our new network, blackusa.news. I know everyone's used to bemorenews.com, but hopefully everyone can shift over and catch the show. So tonight, as we advertised, we are talking about white privilege. And, in the midst of Freddie Gray and specifically George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, there's been such an uprising everywhere across the nation, across the world, really. When it came to George Floyd, it spread and we saw this movement. Lots of allies. I saw people posting things, and me, I'm watching my friends, my white friends, and saying like, are they saying anything? A lot of people were, some people weren't. But we really, we're talking about diversity and equity. A lot of corporations are making all these moves and investments. But I really wanted to talk to it from the perspective of white women. I can't talk about white privilege. I may complain about it. I may feel it. I may feel like I see it. We talk about Black women in business. It affects us in the workplace, with our businesses. I don't know what it's like to have it. And it can impact us. So I'm going to introduce our panel who all have different experiences. I do have one panelist who is of Persian descent. I feel like she can pass, but she has a different experience and an outtake. So we really want to be just transparent and talk about our different experiences with white privilege, how it's affected, what they've seen, how they've seen it affecting people that look like us in their workplace or in their personal lives. So I thank them for coming on blackusa.news to talk about white privilege. So it took a lot of courage. So I'm going to start by introducing, we're missing one panelist. She'll come on a little later, but I'm going to start with Leah IZBICKI-PARROTT. I think I'm saying that right. She is hailing from Houston, Texas. And I personally know Leah from Panama. So she's joining us from Houston. We have Emily HOLT, who attended law school her first year with me at a HBCU. And so we're going to talk about that. And Jasmine Alvarez of Persian descent, both attorneys. Emily and Jasmine are both attorneys. I did go to law school with Jasmine. We graduated from the same law school. So she's going to talk about her experience at the HBCU and her Persian perspective on all of this. And we have Mary NOOR. She is from Baltimore, or one Baltimorean with us. She's actually a resident of Ashburton, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood. And so we're going to talk to her, being from this area, her transition into a Black neighborhood. She's also attended law school. And so we have a lot to talk about. We'll wait for Rebecca will join us soon. But with that being said, Nicole, why don't you start off and just talk just generally about white privilege from your perspective, and then we'll get into our guests.
For me, I guess in like corporate America, you kind of see, I guess, the promotions, where it's I don't know if it's necessarily because of race, or I've seen a lot of family. Of course, they bring their family and they promote their family more than others. Have you seen that as well, or no?
I have. I think, and I think in corporate America, it depends on like the area you work in. Like, I worked in finance for about 6 years for a big investment company. And I started off working in the Louisville office, and then I was transferred here to Houston. That's how I ended up in Texas again. But the office that I worked at had been a family-owned office and then had been bought by this big investment company. And so you did see a lot of nepotism in the office, simply because it had at one point been a family business. And then they would, I would say there was probably 20 people that were related that worked in that office easily, at probably about 300 people easily. And from the big boss, like hiring his son to be one of the traders, to the HR lady's daughter worked there. It was a lot of nepotism. Absolutely.
Wow.
Right. So when that nepotism is there, if my mother doesn't have that opportunity, and my father doesn't have that opportunity, or a relative. So I'm cut off right there at, just.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
That's nepotism is definitely an area that it starts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I can chime in, I'm actually from San Francisco. I've lived out in the DC metro area for the last 10 years. And my first experience with white privilege in the workplace was my first job outside of grad school. I worked for a very well-known nonprofit. And what I kept noticing was, my maiden name is Jasmine Hatam. Not very white sounding. As Tamara said, I may pass for it. But once you look at my paperwork, my passport, I'm not a Caucasian woman living in the United States. And what I kept seeing was, with all my credentials and all my experience, I was hired to be the receptionist at a big, at the time, it was the third biggest nonprofit in the United States. What I kept seeing was, if your name was Emily Jones or Nancy Smith, you were getting those promotions. You were getting hired with less education, less experience to become a director right out of college. The minorities were always the lower positions, the coordinators, the receptionists. And I understand we all have to start somewhere, but I saw that. I came out with an MBA. I had years of experience, and that's my first experience I had with white privilege at the workplace.
That's interesting that you say that, because what I tend to do when we have guests on, or we like we've had like the Reuven Naraja, when he had him on, who ran for state's attorney here in Baltimore City and ran for mayor, who went to Harvard, and I look at the law firm that he works at, and I do that a lot with law firms. I look at like who's there, and it's in Baltimore. There weren't any, you'll see a Black male, you'll see a lot of white women, but you rarely see Black women. And so I look at a lot of corporations. I look at their board of directors even. And, I dig into that, and I do see that a lot. And I'll look at their experience, like who's running the organization. They have a bachelor's degree. And I'm like, well, dang, that's it, and it's that easy. And you're running a whole organization on that. And it's usually a white guy, that has no real education, but he's running an organization. Really quickly, I'm going to bring Rebecca in. She was running a little late. Again, she's in Colorado, so her time is a lot earlier than us. Hi, Becky.
Hey.
You have a little more. Can you get a little more light? We can't see you well.
Let me open my. Oh, then you're gonna see my horrible backyard. Let's see.
Okay, it's okay. While she gets situated, do we want to keep the discussion going? Rebecca, we were talking about everyone's kind of initial experience with white privilege. So Rebecca also lived in Panama with me, as Leah did. So that's why they're on today. So did anyone else want to break in, chime in, make any comments?
In entertainment, and I can speak to what Jennifer was saying about assistants and coordinators in lower level positions. I've been at a couple large entertainment and media companies, and all of the assistants in huge departments and in legal departments too are predominantly Black or ethnic people, and it's frustrating to me because I have a lot of friends that are Black, and seeing them pigeonholed into those positions, and even just not seeing representation at a VP level or a C-suite level is just, it has to be hard. And there's a lot of really talented people that don't have the benefits of having a dad, or what I like to call the boys club, because I run into a lot of issues where, the industry is dominated by men. So even just as a woman, I feel kind of ousted, and it's that much harder for me to kind of prove myself or get into like the inner circle, because they just have the camaraderie based on, being men.
Well, you said something really interesting about the dad, the white male, that force, that kind of, even if you're a white woman and you have a father that may be connected, that's going to help you out. And when Leah and I were talking this week about the minority business programs, I ran that program for the city of Baltimore and those type of programs, and she's kind of familiar with that in the construction industry, how white women are included in the programs, and they get there's specific goals for that. But then you have that either white husband or white father, and a lot of white men were using their wives or daughters to start these businesses to get the benefits of those programs that I, couldn't get. And so that kind of, there's question for me if I understand that, women are not paid the same as men and there is some inequities, but is it that strong where, there should be programs specifically to elevate that are pretty much the same as a program that I would get into?
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's a great question. I've experienced situations as an attorney where people don't take me seriously or they think that I'm the secretary. So I do think that sort of imbalance exists. I would say that, the issues that I face as a white woman are by no means comparable to the issues that you probably face as a Black woman. And, the area with the greater need is like uplifting Black women and promoting Black women. I think white women, unfortunately, we have a lot of benefits, and there's so few programs out there to begin with that we shouldn't be taking away resources from communities that are better served.
Anyone else want to come in? Go ahead.
No, I'm wondering do you know how we should change it? Because it seems that they do have programs that are in place. But if they're not necessarily being monitored, what happens? How do we change it?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, it's typically legislation would have to change, and I don't know that it will, because there definitely are inequities, but there just is an imbalance. And I think the goals for women just in general is lower than minority in some cases. But again, I do know that a lot. I've gotten calls before where white men have openly said, I'm going to put the business in my wife's name. And Leah and I talked about that even with the Hispanic community, where they get the double points as being Hispanic and they use their wives so they can get into those programs. But at any rate, let's see. I want to I know that Jasmine has to cut out a little early. Where did Jasmine go? Oh, she's there. Oh, sorry.
I'm right here.
It's like a panel, I'm looking at all these different panels. I wanted to talk a little more about Jasmine and Emily's experience going to an HBCU law school, why and how that felt. And because I know at UDC, there was a lot of kind of grumbling at times when, like, scholarships, they felt that the school, it was run by Shelley Broderick at the time, who was a white woman. And a lot of people felt like they were trying to whitewash the school and get more white students there and giving them more money than maybe Black students got. So I don't know if either of you want to talk about that and your experience going to an HBCU for law school.
Emily, did you want to start or?
Sure. So I was actually one of the students that got what we called a diversity scholarship. My parents were a little confused by it, but I grew up in the DC area and didn't get into a lot of my first choice schools, and to save money. UDC was very affordable, and I lived at home my first year of school, and then I actually transferred to a school in New York where I'm currently based. But it was a very eye-opening experience. I'm very thankful for it because I think it just allowed me to have a better understanding of the Black perspective. That was truly one of the first times in my life where I felt like a minority. Like I looked around the room and I was one of maybe 4 or 5 white people out of 60. And it just really made me think, I've not been in a lot of situations where I feel like a minority, and having that experience and having your day-to-day life be like that, it just adds pressure because you don't feel as connected. And everyone was very nice to me. There was no social conflicts, but just even hearing some of the conversations where we would have white professors who would, I think, in my position, made kind of innocent comments, not understanding how they would come off, and to see people so affected by them, it was upsetting because you never want to see people's feelings hurt. But I kind of saw both sides of I think she had good intentions, but the delivery was awful. So I still think about my time there because it's definitely, impacted me in how I kind of perceive social situations still, because it was just something so different. And I, growing up in the DC area, it wasn't like there weren't Black people around, or I was in circles that were predominantly white. But just being kind of a true minority for once was really different.
Wow, a diversity scholarship. That's interesting. Jasmine, anything?
Oh, Leah, were you going to say something?
It was just funny that I went to college in North Carolina in Greensboro, and they had an A&M school, and they had people there that were on diversity scholarships as well that were white, which I thought was funny at the time. I always thought that's just bizarre to me. It's just bizarre, but
just to chime in, as I said before, I'm from California, San Francisco, and you don't get more liberal than that. The school I went to for grad school was in Oakland. It's tons of minorities. Depends on what part of Oakland you're coming from. But coming out to DC Metro, starting school at UDC, first off, I tried getting into law school for a decade. It just never worked out. I kept persisting. I got in with my husband. We got married the week that we started law school, which was crazy. But he is Latino. I am Middle Eastern. And when we did get our scholarship offers, he got one which was significantly more than mine. And I was in the name of MLK, which I was like, wow, do they know that I am not an African-American woman? Do they know that? Or but he got one, I think, in the name of somebody named Rodriguez, which I thought was interesting. To be honest with you, UDC opened my eyes to a lot of things that in California, I think we live in a bubble because we're so liberal. There's so much diversity. I never felt that much racist tendencies until I came out to the DC Metro, which is still very diverse. Coming out here, I made a ton of African-American friends. I interned for 2 African-American attorneys my summer after 1L. There were things at UDC. The first book we had to read was about the new Jim Crow. There were things in that I had no idea. Out of maybe sheer ignorance, or maybe nobody had really presented it to me. When I interned for the 2 African-American attorneys, they told me about the Tulsa bombings and Black Wall Street. And I was completely shocked that was never taught as curriculum in any of my schooling. And I have a master's degree, a law degree. It was never brought up to me. So in terms of diversity, as someone that can pass for white, who I always joke with my husband, I said, I'm always white till I get to the airport, was when they start looking at your passport. Oh, you were born in Iran. Then they treat you different. I was so ignorant, and I'm ashamed to say that, but UDC did open my eyes to a lot of things that we never knew was present. There was one article I was reading in preparation for tonight that I had known about, but I wanted statistics. I didn't want to let Tamara down. And it was from the Harvard Business School that said, when applying for jobs, if you whitewash your name, you have a 25% chance of more callbacks.
Yeah.
Is that something that anyone talks about? How do we change that? How do we change the people in power being able to basically the Tom Jones and the John Smiths are going to get hired over the minority non-white names?
Right, especially if you have an HBCU on your resume, they got you right there. They're like, what? So,
yeah, I was going to mention that earlier when you were speaking about your name. I've read articles. I've seen that happen a lot. A lot of people will change their name if it seems foreign or, too Black, or, they will change their names and they get to the callbacks. They don't get, tossed to the bottom of the resume pile, things of that nature. So I think that does have some sort of first impression, right or wrong, but it does. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Mary, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, great. So let's get into you. Mary, Mary NOOR, your last name. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about just the strength of moving into Ashburton in Baltimore City in the middle of a Black neighborhood. We are always concerned with gentrification. So we were like, okay, white people are coming. When you moved in, how has it been? I mean, tell us your experience just living there, or any experience that you've had that you want to
Sure. Well, I didn't even know Ashburton existed. When we were looking for homes, we were looking for a certain price point, and we kind of stumbled on this neighborhood, and it was because the homes were priced lower. And when we found this house, I mean, I fell in love with the home because it's a historic neighborhood. The homes are older, they're brick, they're beautiful homes. It was a quiet neighborhood. So I didn't have any reservations about moving into the neighborhood. We did realize at some point that it was predominantly African-American neighborhood, but that wasn't an issue for me. I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland in a town called Princess Anne. UMES is down there, and there's a pretty predominant presence, African-American population there. I think it's, maybe half and half. But I grew up with, certain racial issues happening in and around my town, things like that. But I didn't have any qualms about moving into the neighborhood. And as a matter of fact, one of the first things I did was remove the security door from my front door and I put in a full glass door, because I wasn't going to live, afraid. I wasn't going to, fear my neighbors or anything.
You always have your door open. I was like,
yeah,
your door open and you can just walk right in. Oh my goodness.
And it's been great. I mean, I think everyone's been welcoming, and I have noticed over the last few years that more diverse people are moving into the neighborhood. More Caucasian people, even Asian people have moved in. So, but I love it. And as far as workplace issues, like I said, I let you know that I haven't actually been working. I haven't been in the workforce for a little while. But before that, I worked in a small firm where it was actually more African-American employees, partners, the attorneys, than there were white. I was actually kind of a minority there. So I didn't really notice any, white privilege issues. But I think that kind of not noticing is kind of at the crux of the whole white privilege issue, where you don't perceive special treatment, but that's not what it's about. It's about the absence of discrimination and poor treatment by virtue of your skin color, and I think that's at the crux, the heart of white privilege deniers, which it doesn't seem that we have any of those on the panel tonight, but I think that's a significant, I think, thing to point out is that, I don't know I don't know the privileges and the experiences that I would have had differently if I were African American. So I think that that's important to notice, that I'm completely ignorant of it being white, because it's something I think that's innate in my whiteness, is that privilege, it's inborn in the color of my skin.
Wow.
I had a kind of an epiphanous moment when I was under 10 years old, where I don't remember the circumstances, whether it was learning about Black history in school or whether I heard a racist conversation, but I had a clear moment where I said to myself, I'm glad I was born white, because there was this safety that I understood that came with the color of my skin. So, and I recognize that at a very early age. I was under 10 years old. So.
Wow. And for you to say that, I appreciate that. You really I knew we were going to have by the people that I chose, I knew we were going to have a real open and honest discussion about that.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. I was going to say, I wanted to touch on that as well, is the fact that I'm first generation of my family born in this country, but because I'm white and my family is white, just one generation removed, I'm completely nobody's yelling at me to go back to my country. Nobody's screaming at me. And it's simply just because I'm white. Because if you had met my grandmother before she passed away, you could barely understand her because she had a really thick Italian accent. She and my grandfather came over after the war. But simply just by being white, you also remove that stigma of immigration, of being an immigrant to the country, because by one generation, the accents are gone. And if you're white passing, then, all that goes away. And I think that really adds to it as well. With Tamara, being Black and being Latina, it was a double especially in Panama, where, you know, you had the Ravi Blancos and the whole idea of being white was just what everybody wanted. I mean, I was 15 years old going to bars because I was white and blonde. I got to go, you know, and anywhere else it wouldn't have happened. But because we were American girls, blonde, you know, whatever, we got to go out and do lots of things the other girls couldn't do. And my friends that were Panamanian and were darker skinned sometimes would have issues when we went out, you know, but I was always the girl that, well, they're not going, I'm not going.
Rebecca experienced that like first experience. Rebecca, welcome to the show. You can unmute yourself. We're going to talk about that. So again, if the viewers don't know, my parents are born Panamanians. Their parents were, some of them were born in Panama, some of them were born via the Panama Canal. So it brought a lot of people to Panama. And when my father joined the Army, we went back to Panama, stationed there as U.S. citizens, and he was an officer. So I found myself in a different situation because in Panama, most of the the Caribbean Black people from Panama lived in Rio Bajo, which was, you know, that's where all the Black people were. And then here we coming back now, that's where my parents were raised. And it was kind of, that was the hood, you know? And so coming back as my father as an officer, living in Altos de la Loma, living in a really nice neighborhood, you know, having all this, having more money, I kind of hung out with, you know, I was surrounded with different people, and I lived a different life than my parents lived. And I met Rebecca, and she lived in this high-rise downtown Panama, and I was like, whoa, you know, it was just like amazing. And we went shopping one day. We became really close friends in middle school. Went shopping one day, and you know, this lady was harassing me. We won't get into the details, but yeah, Rebecca did. And then here it is. I was the Panamanian. You know, I was the one that was born there. You know, my parents were native of this country, and I was being harassed by the Hispanic, the Chola, the whiter looking Spanish folks. And so that's a whole Latin thing that we'll discuss another time. Maybe I'll get a panel of some more Spanish looking Latinas, and we'll talk about that. There's an African Latina. But Rebecca, talk about your experience. You are an educator in Colorado, and
I am.
Yeah, you had that bad experience with me. How'd that open your eyes?
You know, I don't know that it opened my eyes at that point in my life. Like, my parents raised me so open-minded that I really didn't recognize racism for a long time because it wasn't prevalent in my mind. I never looked at you differently. You know, you were my best friend. We hung out. Like, I thought we got in trouble. I never really felt like you got in trouble, which is interesting now at 47 years old. I'm thinking I never looked at it from your perspective because we just got in trouble together. So my experience didn't really change for me. Honestly, Tamara, when Trump got elected, you and I had a couple conversations, and that was when I really started to see your perspective a lot more. You posted some things on Facebook that honestly aggravated me. I was like, well, why are you teaching your kids to not just be open-minded? And then you messaged me privately, and you're like, picture this, put yourself in my position. And you really opened my eyes up to it. And my issue wasn't that I ever thought that your kids or that people of color should act a certain way. It was that I never saw it that way. My parents were so open-minded that for me, I never saw the color between us. And it was interesting. And now as an educator, and someone mentioned there in California where it's super liberal. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, so I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but so liberal. I mean, everybody's gay out here. Everybody's black or white or mixed races, whatever. And I actually teach, I'm one of the few white educators in my school. We have a lot of Hispanic community, and I don't speak Spanish, and I actually have to have 2 assistants to make it so I can do my job. I wouldn't be able to do my job because I'm a Head Start teacher, so I deal with low income and underprivileged children anyway, and they all speak Spanish. And I have to have assistants to help me do my job. So for me, I've always valued other people and what they can provide for me and help me so that I can do what I need to do. And when we were in Panama, I remember like everybody spoke English. And I can remember when I moved back stateside thinking everybody was so mad that if you're going to move to America, learn how to speak English and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know. I lived in a Spanish speaking country and I never had to learn. You know, everybody took care of me. Everybody catered to me. And that's really the only racial experience I can remember taking from Panama was that I didn't have to change who I was to live in a country where I was kind of the minority at that point and didn't speak the language. So I took that from that. I did have one experience. Interesting that we're doing this right now because I've actually had a lot of conversations lately about, because I live in such a predominant Hispanic community, where I stand as a white female and that I have white privilege. And that conversation has been really happening a lot lately. But I've actually been turned down for jobs because I don't speak Spanish and I'm not Hispanic. So definitely not the same caliber that other people have dealt with, but I did get a little taste of it, that a job that I was perfectly qualified for. It was actually a teaching position and there was another receptionist. I was like, well, if I can't teach, let me at least sit at the front desk of the school. And I wasn't allowed to have either of those jobs because I didn't speak Spanish. So and it irritated me. I got upset about it, but it also just made me kind of want to learn Spanish. Like I need to better myself so I can work with the changing world and be where I am and meet my families that I work with where they're at. But I don't know.
So
I think the details.
It's interesting that you said that you didn't see color, because that's kind of been like a sticky point with this whole movement. And Mary made a very good point that just the whole basis of that white privilege is not having to think about it, and so a lot of people would be offended to say, well, what do you mean you don't see color? That's part of it. You have to see the color. You have to see the differences. You have to be able to see that.
I think it's
right.
about appreciating it. Yeah. Being able to appreciate the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if you remember specifically the post that you made on Facebook years ago, Tammy.
I didn't even remember. I'm sure it was quite.
It had something to do with your son holding a door for a white woman. I don't remember the details of it, but she was snotty or snide or something. And it was right in the middle of one of the major, like, somebody had been shot and killed. A black person had just been killed, and it was a big thing in the media. And you posted how you were worried about, and you were going to teach your kids just not to talk to white people. And you were blunt about it. And I was like, whoa, what? I'm white. Why won't your kids talk to me? And I said something, and you messaged me privately. And you really, that was a big turning point for me. Like, you know what? As a mom, I've never considered that my kids have a whole different life than your kids do. I joke about this a lot with my son that just turned 18. When he was 14, we were living in Grand Junction, Colorado, and he went to spend the night at a friend's house. He got bored and he decided to walk home, and there's a curfew there of 11 p.m. And so he got stopped by the police, and we lived right on, like, the street over was where everything kind of went downhill a little bit. The drugs and the different families were there. And the officer asked him where he was going, and he said, I'm going home. I'm about 2 blocks from home. And he said, well, hurry up and get home then. He didn't. And I'm going to admit to you, my kid had weed on him. And I was like, you are so lucky that you're not brown or black. Honestly, like, if you had been a brown kid, because there was a lot of Hispanics in that area, they would have taken your hat off, which is where he was hiding it. They would have they would have searched you. And I would have been getting a phone call from the jail, not from you showing up at home. Like, you're a little blonde white kid with cute dimples. Like, you completely got your free reason.
Or a call from the morgue.
Exactly. It could have been in the hospital. Yeah, exactly. So, that was huge for me too. I was like, because I knew a lot of kids walked around the neighborhoods, and I took a deep breath, like, thank God you're white. Like, that could have turned out so differently. And that was big for me to really be like, I can let my kids go out and I don't worry the same way you worry about your kids. And I don't have to teach my kids to keep your hands at 10 and 2 when you're driving. And I'm actually, Facebook friends, don't tell anybody this. I'm actually dating a Hispanic guy right now. And he got pulled over the other night because I was with him, sitting at a stoplight. It's red. And he took his hands off the wheel to take a drink. And he got pulled over and was cited for distracted driving at a red light, drinking his drink.
And did you get the badge number? Really, I mean, because that's to me is what kind of stops it and starts putting the monkey wrench in it, is when you recognize that those differences are occurring. And unfortunately, it's going to take you guys to fight it. I mean,
yeah. He's dealt with this a lot, so he actually did handle it. Got that. He's made a report, and he's been through a lot with the police in this area for sure. So and he'll be the first one to tell me how much privilege I have. He has no problem pointing it out to me. I mean, I hate to say we joke about it because I know it's so serious for some people, but the other night he ran a yellow light in front of a cop, and I was like, let's switch places. You know, they're not going to give me a ticket. You know, it's true.
Right.
My kids were like 6 and 7. The first time I really got it was I took them down. We lived in Louisville, Kentucky, which if you don't know, Louisville is like very diverse, and they still bus in Louisville. They're still like my kids, half their school was kids from our neighborhood and half were the kids from downtown Louisville. So I did like that part because my kids from a young age were very aware of like very abject poverty and kids whose parents were in rehab or stuff like that. But when it really hit me was I took the kids to like Thunder Over Louisville. It's a big, huge festival right before the Kentucky Derby. And their best friend was this little boy named Malachi, who's Black. Malachi was always at our house, or they were always at his house. Like he was with us all the time. And we were downtown and it was all these people there and the kids were acting up. And so I said to all 3 boys, hey, if you don't stop acting up, I'm going to take you over there and we're going to go talk to that police officer over there. And he can tell you guys, you know, behave yourselves. My 2 kids were like, Malachi freaked out, like had a meltdown and started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. You know, and I had to calm him down and, you know, everything was fine. And the day went by fine. But I talked to his mom, Alicia, when I dropped him off. And she was like, oh, sweetie, I should have told you. Ray got arrested last week. They had gone to the outlet mall. And exact same thing. The officer had told him to take a left or right or something, and Ray didn't respond apparently the right way, and they arrested him. And I had no idea. And that's when it really hit me that while my kids weren't scared of the police, like Malachi was deathly afraid of the police, and that it broke my heart because he was like my child. I mean, if you go back, like if you're on my Facebook, you go back when we lived in Louisville. There's so many pictures of him and my kids together because they were like. He was always at my house or they were always at his house. Like it just broke my heart. And that's when I was like, wow, you know, I mean, it's just when, you know, like when Trump got elected, I called my best friend, Rachel Peterson in Florida. And I was like, are you okay? Cause she was like, she's Black and she was freaking out. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I say? You know, I'm fighting for you, but what can I do? Like, I think my biggest problem is I don't feel like I can do enough.
Right. We've got a lot of questions coming in from some viewers, and we're going to get to them because they're kind of popping up everywhere. But we're going to get to them in a moment. But I do want to talk about. I know Jasmine. At some point, you got to go give the baby the bath time, and I know you want to stay on a little bit. But I want to just talk about because I have 4 of us or 5. I mean 5 of us. We've kind of been involved in the legal community, and something I say. And I tried to say when I do this diversity and equity inclusion and try to get minority businesses or Black businesses specifically, because I live in a majority Black city, I try to get the inclusion into work and business and opportunities with contracting and things of that nature. I'm really passionate about that. And let's talk about the legal field. And this is an analogy I try to give people. And the reality of it is that, you know, a Black attorney is at a disadvantage. Okay, period. A Black woman attorney is at a disadvantage. A white attorney is going to get business from the white community.
Is my wallet on the dresser there?
I'm going to mute you, Rebecca, real quick. Okay, so a Black, you know, but a Black lawyer is really only can rely on the Black community. So but some people are going to go to white lawyers. A white person is not going to hire a Black lawyer, very rarely. But for the most part, I mean, Jasmine, you've interned for a Black firm. I think Emily, you stated you did, or Mary has worked for a Black firm. I mean, maybe here and there. Mary, I do know who you work for, maybe a little bit there, but I mean that's just a reality in the legal field. It's really difficult because a lot of Black people will tend to want to use a white attorney. What they'll say is, oh, you know, like they still think it's like 1902 and they think they're going to get some deal with the judge and the white guy went to school and had, you know, that's not how it works. But that's a reality. Does anyone want to talk about that? I mean, you and your husband have a law firm. Would any of you pick a Black attorney if you were in trouble? I mean, or go to a Black business, patronize a Black business. Let's just say in general. So we don't get the support from white people, but we do go. I mean, I'll easily go to a white business. It happens every day. They're everywhere. Do you consciously think about that, or do you patronize Black businesses? I guess that's the question.
I do. I think I do so intentionally, though, and it's usually when there's some sort of kind of national recognition. It's, you know, Black Restaurant Week, or, you know, something along those lines, or there's been a list publicized of all of the Black restaurants in Baltimore City, you know, and I I intentionally try to do that. But normally I don't research a restaurant and say, okay, you know, are they Black owned or are they white owned? Usually I'm just, you know, seeing pictures on Instagram and it looks good and I'm like, oh, I want to try that place. But if it happens to be Black owned, I will go out of my way sometimes to you know, patronize those businesses. As far as hiring a Black attorney, I have from the firm that I used to work at. Because both partners, you know, had some African American heritage, or, you know, but I agree. I think that people of races or cultures tend to stick to their own when it comes to lawyers, professionals, doctors, things like that. Although I do have an African American doctor as my primary care physician. But I think, I think you're right that there is a tendency to seek, you know, a white attorney if you're a white person. Or a Black attorney, maybe it's because you think that they have a better understanding of what your unique issue and, you know, legal issue is. But also, yeah, the older white lawyers, you might think that, oh, they know the judges, they know all the attorneys, they, you know, there might be some sort of reputation there that you can lean into. But yeah.
As a minority-owned law firm, 2 minority attorneys, my husband and I, we have gotten turned down by clients. They'll say, you know, my husband speaks Spanish. His first name is Silvano, last name Alvarez. They'll say, oh, is he, you know, I'm trying not to get emotional, is he Latino? I'll say, yeah. And they'll say, okay, we're going to pass, or we're going to go with a white law firm, or some disgusting people say a Jewish-owned law firm, because there is that stigma that the Jewish male attorneys have more privilege in the courts. They're smarter, but in my experience, the Black litigators, the 2 ladies I interned for, one is now a judge in Stafford County in Virginia. They're amazing, and I'm not going to sound cliche, but it really, the skin color doesn't have anything to do with someone's ability, and I wish people would disengage from that mentality. How do we change that? I don't know. I know my OBGYN is African American. I know my mentors have all been African American.
I know you're getting emotional. I'm gonna just do I'm getting emotional too. So yeah, I remember Jasmine sends me the picture of her new OBGYN, and it wasn't about his color. It was, I mean, this kid must be about 12 years old. This is my new doctor, and I was like, 12? He does look young.
I was terrified.
Yeah, she was talking about his age. She was just shocked. And I'm like, oh my God, he does look young. And I said, well, wait a minute. She's got a Black doctor now. So, you know, kudos to you for that. It really, the focus for you, you were just so disturbed by how young he looked. And that was a lot for you.
Absolutely. I'd never questioned his ability, his talents. I was so impressed by this young man. My only qualm was, if this young man, it was his first job out of med school, was going to cut me in half and tear that baby out. Was this your first job out of med school? But we're cool. Of course I would hire a Black doctor, a Black attorney. It breaks my heart sometimes in Northern Virginia. You know, this area has 80,000 attorneys. There's more attorneys saturated in this tri-state area than anywhere else. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I do okay, you know. I always tell people the analogy of, I'm a German Shepherd. I'm a pit bull. My husband's a German Shepherd. He's the smarter one. He's more calm. He's the better attorney. And when people brush him aside because of his name or what he looks like, it just kills me, because I know he is the best attorney. I know. I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm not tooting my own horn. It just kills me that so many people want to disengage from so many other talented individuals based on what they look like, what their name is. It's such a disservice to humanity. And in general. And I fear for that when, you know, I have one son and I have another one on the way. And it's sad that some of the names I would like to call my son or name my son, I know in the community I live in, I know they will have a hard time. I know they will get racist remarks. When I moved to Falls Church, Virginia, our neighbor put up a Confederate flag across the street. And why? Because a Mexican moved across the street from you, a Persian, you know, whatever you want to call me. I've been called terrible names, camel jockey, turban head, whatever you want to call it. You put up a Confederate flag for what? I pay taxes. I employ people. I have several businesses. I create jobs in this country. When the tax man comes, he collects from me. So I'd like to see you create jobs. And I think I am the American dream. We are the American dream. I wasn't born here. My husband was, but we try to create something and make something out of ourselves. Sorry, I'm gonna start ranting.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you.
No, preach. I want to ask a question. Have you guys seen this? When I lived in Louisville, I was in litigation for almost 20 years when I was there. So I was very involved with the court system. And one of the things that happened when I lived there was one of the judges I was really good friends with, a guy named Olu Stevens. There was a big scandal with him. And the thing that really upset me was he was completely held to a higher standard than any of the other judges. And it was so ridiculous. And it was it made national news. It was absolutely ludicrous. And I was so mad about how they treated him because, quite frankly, I loved being in his courtroom. And he was such a great judge. Like, I just admired him so much. And when it all happened, that was the thing that pissed me off the most was I knew for a fact, because we had some bad judges in Louisville, that the only reason that things were going down the way they were going down was because he was black. And
I commend Olu Stevens for what he did. He wasn't giving people bail, black men in particular. He was doing things a little bit different. I think that's what it was. There was a couple of things that happened. One was he was the judge that when Breonna Taylor was murdered.
Yes.
That's right.
He was the judge that let her boyfriend out on bail.
That's right.
So, and this was before that. What he got in trouble for was talking about the underhanded things that were going on in the prosecutor's office. And basically what happened was in his courtroom, they allowed the prosecutor read a very racist statement about a crime that had been committed. And he stopped him and said, "We're done. That was a racist statement. Whatever." And what happened was Tom Wine, which was the attorney general, ended up just creating a big he got basically really railroaded. And the good thing is he didn't lose his career over it and he came out on top. But it was so ridiculous. And it was ridiculous after he let Breonna Taylor's boyfriend out too. There was a lot of protests and a lot of really nasty things. And I think that's why he's not running for judge again. He's finish it out.
Done with it, so. I commend him. He went to Morehouse. His wife went to Spelman.
She's amazing.
Kentucky, and she's a doctor, and he's a judge, and they're just great. So I do.
Yeah, they are. I met him because I worked with him. I was working at a law firm, and he was the only black partner at the law firm. One of the only black people in the entire law firm, and he and I just really clicked. We worked a lot together, and even after I left. I took a friend of mine's son over to meet him because he was a young black man and he was trying to decide, if he wanted to go to law school or medical school. And he didn't really have a mentor because his mom was a single mom. So I took him over to the courthouse, had him watch Olu in court, how to meet Olu, because he really needed a strong male mentor. And they became Olu. And that was the other thing too. He had programs in his courtroom. He, his kid, anyone that was on probation in his courtroom, he had a program with them. They had to show up, wear dress clothes. He introduced them to people that would hire them because a lot of people don't realize that you can get hired if you're a felon. Humana, which is a huge company in Louisville, hires felons. And so he would have people come in and talk to these young black men about.
Everyone can mute if you're not talking. So we're getting a little bit of feedback. Sorry.
But he just really was such a good voice in the community, and he just got railroaded. And it was because he was pushing for more programs in Louisville. Louisville is a very, very divided city racially. I mean, it is. And he really wanted to really push the diversity and, you know, give kids more chances. And I think that's a lot of the reason that he got really just railroaded. But yeah, they're a great couple, absolute great couple.
Okay. Emily and Rebecca haven't spoken in a moment, and then I'm going to get to some of the comments, get through them, and then you know, we're almost at an hour. It went really fast. I figured this may take a little more than an hour, but you know, we can stay on a little after. I did want to talk about the white missing woman syndrome, the whole Karen thing. I just don't think we're going to have time for everything. I do want to get to a few comments. Kamal, who has a show on Fridays, a cryptocurrency show here. He wanted to know how like diversity inclusive contracting programs can be amended or adjusted in light of the overrepresentation of white women. Again, I'll go into the questions, but did anyone want to add something else, Emily or Rebecca, before I get to questions? And then maybe we can open up some more discussion if we go a little over. I know that Jasmine has to go bathe her baby. So Jasmine, if you need to cut out, just, you know, put it in the chat, and we do appreciate you being on here. And if you have something to say, if you have to go now, go right ahead.
You had mentioned supporting Black businesses. You know, the one thing, George Floyd and all the protests, that was very overwhelming for me. I felt kind of just lost, and I didn't know the best way, like, for me to help. You know, there's a lot of things to do. But one of the things that I like made a commitment to for myself was to try and like actively find Black restaurants to go eat at. Eat Okra is a really good website where you can search up like Black businesses in your area. So I think that's like an easy step to do as a white person, is to be, at least at a minimum, be an ally. And there's a lot of different ways of protesting. I think, you know, sometimes being kind of in your face isn't always effective, and putting your dollar where it counts, and, you know, supporting Black creatives, supporting, you know, even just YouTube people. Jackie Ina is like one of my favorite YouTube makeup artists, and just trying to elevate Black voices and Black restaurants, I think is really important, and, you know, something that I've just been working on, and trying to get all of my other white friends to do the same. You know, in the workplace too, one of my really good friends is a Black woman in her 40s, and it's really frustrating for me to see. So she's a Jehovah's Witness, didn't go to college because of her religion, is one of the smartest people I know, and is kind of pigeonholed in this role where, because of her resume not, you know, having a college degree, people think that she's not capable of doing things. And I, you know, almost treat her as a paralegal because she, you know, has a ton of corporate law experience, and helps me with like preliminary drafting, and just, you know, she's the type of person where if you ask her to do something, even if she doesn't know what she's doing, she'll figure it out. And so seeing her experiences in the workplace where, you know, her male coworker is getting paid probably double what she's getting paid, and she's better at their collective job than he is just, you know, infuriating to me. So I think there's, you know, a lot of things that need to change, but the one thing that's very easy for white people to do is to, you know, be an ally and advocate for people when they can't always advocate for themselves, or even just need additional help advocating for themselves, because people, for whatever reason, will listen to me a little bit more than they'll listen to her. So.
Right. And another way is, you know, when you, because you all are in positions where you may be able to climb and elevate in different levels, just keep that in mind. You know, when you are running a business, or you are running a portion of an organization, you know, do you keep that in mind? Am I going to hire someone that's more diverse? You know, I'm sure there's a white guy that has the same background as this woman that you spoke about, Emily, that's, you know, running a business, and someone's like, damn, he has no college education. I mean, it happens more so there than it would with, you know, a Black woman. Rebecca, did you want to say something else? And then I'm going to start reading some of the comments and try to get to them. Again, Jasmine, if you have to go, we may go a little over. If you guys need to cut out, just put it in the chat. I'll make sure I do a nice exit for you. And then I do appreciate you all being here. So, Rebecca, did you want to say anything else?
No.
Specifically? Oh, okay. Mary, anything?
Yeah, real quick. Just something else, and this isn't necessarily probably something that anybody could do, but one of the other things that I've done when I moved into this neighborhood was I kind of went to the elementary school which is a pretty bad elementary school. It's not ranked very high in the city. But one of the things I wanted to do, and I did this for a few months before it kind of fizzled out for various reasons, but I went to the principal and I asked if I could start bringing in on a monthly basis professional Black men to come and share their experience as professionals to these young students in these classrooms, various grade levels. And I was specific that I didn't want to bring in white men. I wanted to bring in Black men who were successful and who could show an example and be an example to these children. And so I thought that.
I remember you asking my husband to do it. I do remember.
Yeah, exactly. I did. And he did send an attorney in his place, but and then I had like a poet, songwriter, and a real estate professional. So I think it's important. I do the whole eating at Black restaurants too, but there's other ways if you kind of get creative, and if the schools and places will allow you to kind of try to introduce these types of things, to be an ally, and to but be aware that you can't just bring in your whiteness and try to fix everything. People are put off by that, and you have to recognize that they need Black role models in these schools and in their lives, especially for a lot of African American children in the city schools that do have that absence of a Black role model or a father figure and things like that. So.
All right, thanks, Nicole. If you don't have anything, I'm gonna just try to read some of the comments.
Basically, I think for me, I'm just soaking it all in. It's nice to meet you all. And I think that it does. It starts with each individual when you see it and being able to call it out and speak to it and changing it. I mean, because in everyone's life, our experiences are different. But recognizing when we see a problem, if someone's being treated differently, and calling out, whether it's the police officer that's pulling over our friend, getting that badge number and holding them accountable, whether it's the person in the store that you may see that's following someone around when you may be the one that may be stealing. I'm just joking, but just calling them out. And I think that that's kind of what it's going to take, because they're not necessarily listening to the minorities. So it's going to have to be the people that look like the people that are doing the discrimination to change it. And that's just kind of where we are in the country. And I mean, while it's unfortunate, we have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable. So I think that's the answer, and I admit I raise my kids right now in a privileged area, but I force them to go back and to understand what that they're raised in a certain manner, but that does not make them better than anyone else. And that they have to go into the city, and they work because they have their little jobs in my store, and it's just part of giving them the culture and so that they can understand, because at the end of the day, no matter where I raise my kids, whether it's privileged in the city, they're still Black. And that's what as a mother, that's what I have 2 Black sons, and regardless of where I raise them, I fear for them every day. So I think that having white friends, is great, and I tell my white friends that they got to speak up. If you see something wrong, you got to call it out. You have to call it out, because they're not listening to me. And they're not afraid, regardless of what zip code I live in. So I think that that's the important part is that you guys do recognize that it is something that is happening and speaking to it.
Well, and you have to teach your kids too. That's the other thing. My boys are big allies like I am, and my son actually made a comment about the fact that his friend Oge's mother was giving him crap because Oge always wears a sweatshirt with a hood. And Josh is like, his mom worries about him. I wear a sweatshirt too, and you don't worry about me. And I said, because you have white privilege. When my son and I had a big fight, and my son's autistic, and he had a meltdown, and he had a onesie kind of deal, and he took off, and it was like 40 degrees outside, and he ended up being brought home by the police because, people were calling because there's this, 6 foot tall kid running around in this onesie. I wasn't worried about him getting hurt because he's a white boy, you know, but he worries about.
Well, Leah, you're freezing up a little bit. I don't know what happened to your connection. Yeah, Leah's frozen. So I'm going to get to one question because Emily made a comment when she talked about going to the HBCU about finances and how it was cheaper to go. And one of the viewers, Kelly Bigelow, one of our troublemakers, she wanted to know do you consider your choice to attend a Black educational institution due to economics disingenuous by saying that, well, it was more economic for you to go there. What would be your response to that, Emily?
No, that's an interesting point. I've never thought about it like that. I will say that I didn't fully know what to expect going through HBCU. Out of the choices that I had, because I got into a couple other schools that also offered me scholarships, it just seemed to be the best fit. And I'm, really grateful for the experiences I had there because I think it's made me a better person and made me a more understanding person. But you're right. I don't really know what my intentions going into it were. I think as a white person, it was very interesting, getting a scholarship offer from HBCU because I'm not the target demographic. And law school is just kind of difficult regardless. So having a school that financially was a little more affordable for me, I think regardless if it was HBCU, I still would have picked a financially reasonable school, and I would do it again. I'm really grateful for all the people that I met and the kind of just experiences that I had while I was there. So.
Okay. So another question, I guess I'll send this one over to Mary. Mary, are you shocked that African Americans, people in like particularly Ashburton, want their neighborhoods to remain, their communities to remain Black? How do you feel about that? And then, embedding yourself in that community.
Well, I wasn't aware that was the case. Most of the neighbors have been welcoming and warm to me. I have actually gone on a run kind of closer to the elementary school, and I've been told that I was in the wrong neighborhood. And I was like, well, I live here. This is my hood. And I've been, I've gone on to into the Mondulman Mall to get my nails done before, and I've been kind of asked what I was doing there, because there's just not a lot of white people that go into that mall. I feel like it's my right to live wherever I want to live. And when I moved in, it wasn't like I looked at this as a Black community and I was gonna, gentrify it or anything like that. That's never been my, outlook on anything. And it was because of the price point. And I think that's probably because it's an African American neighborhood, and the homes are significantly lower. Like I've said this several times, my home would have probably cost triple or quadruple the amount for this exact home in a white neighborhood or in Towson or in the county. So I don't think that that's a good way to approach things. I didn't realize that Black neighborhoods wanted to stay Black.
I guess it's a whole when they talk about gentrification being a bad thing. So I think that was.
Well, I'm not trying, and I try to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. I mean, I'm not trying to make it into something that it's not or take away from its historical, nature or anything like that. And I think I get along quite well with most of the neighbors.
Right. Okay. Question for everyone. One of you guys can take this. What Black documentaries regarding Black people or culture have you watched or books you've read? And I know Jasmine was talking about, and Emily, we all had to read certain books when we went into UDC. Jim Crow was the book that we all had to read coming into the school and write something about it or reflect on it or reflect on different experiences we've had. My experience was that I wrote about for law school was, of course, dealing with a police officer being driving while Black. And so I think all of us had different experiences. But what do you all like? I know the producer of the show, Donnie Glover, has Black Wall Street. You can purchase that to learn about Black Wall Street. I know it was new to Jasmine, the Tulsa burning, and he talks about that a lot. Does anyone like read literature or try to learn or watch documentaries about Black history to learn more and educate yourself on what has happened and what is happening?
As part of like our required reading, we did all read the new Jim Crow, which was very interesting to me because there was a lot of just information that I didn't know, or the way that it was phrased and presented was very different. I kind of like more cultural things. So the Meek Mill documentary on Amazon about his incarceration and the judge and how he was treated in Philadelphia is just honestly disgusting to me. But that was really informative. And then I watched, there was a series on Malcolm X, which I thought was really good. And I honestly just didn't know his history. And, you know, there's always been rumors about how he was killed by the FBI. Or, you know, the government, and just like going into that more and, you know, growing up in Newark and all of that, especially being in, you know, the New York area, I really enjoyed. And, you know, I'm always trying to look for, you know, new shows and programs or just ways to learn more, because I think that's kind of my job as a white person, is to educate myself as much as possible. You know, it's no one's job to teach me about racism. It's my job to, you know, understand how white people have been assholes in the past and, you know, do better.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up. I appreciate you ladies just staying a little after. I don't want to keep you long. I mean, we could probably do this again, and we probably should do it again, because there's so much more to talk about. We didn't get to it, but I'm gonna give everyone an opportunity to maybe discuss, just, you know, wrap up, share some thoughts, or just talk about, you know, what you're doing to help fix some of this, or if you know, or aha moment where, or maybe even this show help you kind of click and think a little different when you see a Black woman or a white man approaching you, or just whatever you want to say in closing. So I'm going to start with Leah. Leah, are you back on? Okay.
I am.
Okay. I'll start with Leah in closing. What would you like to say?
I don't know. I'm just going to continue to try to be an ally as much as I can. You know, I live in Montgomery County, in Texas, which is one of the most horrible places to live. We're about 35 miles north of Houston. They still have Trump rallies here. So it is a really difficult place to live. But I try my best every day to just be an ally. If I see something, I mean, I'm that crazy white lady. Like 2 weeks ago, my kids were not laughing at me, but they just expect my insanity because a guy was pulled over and I just pulled the car over, got out and had my phone out. And my son's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I need to make sure that I'm recording this in case something happens. Like, I don't want something to happen to this young man. And, you know, I get yelled at, but nobody ever messes with me. And, you know, and that's what I do. That's, you know, it's one of the only things I can do is just try to be an ally as much as I can.
Yeah. Using that privilege in a positive way to help someone else. I commend you. And I do know, I said, I know who's going to go really hard on this show, and it's going to be you because I see what you do. So, well,
I love
we need to do a part 2, and we do need to talk about the whole Trump era. We didn't even get to that.
Oh God, it's awful here.
But Leah, thank you for joining us. Mary, did you want to your closing statement?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just basically doing anything you can do to make your voice heard as an ally. Say if you see something, you do something. And I'm kind of that same way. You know, I'll pull over if I see a bunch of kids, you know, chasing down another kid or just anything like that. You know, I definitely try to do my best to be cognizant of what other people are experiencing. And to speak to the documentary thing, you know, the 13th, where it was about the prison, you know, reform or incarceration, the disproportionate amount of people, Black people that are in the prison system, you know, that's something that I'm really interested in and passionate about. And anything that you can do or that I can do to assist, you know, with expungements and just things like that, things that affect African American men and women disproportionately. That's what I try to do, and am passionate about doing. So just speaking up and being an ally.
Appreciate that. Jasmine, I appreciate you staying on. You stayed on the whole time. You're with child and you have a baby that needs a bath. Thank you so much. What would you like to say in closing?
Well, Daddy's going to do bath time because I really did enjoy this discussion. So thanks for having me on. One thing about the documentary thing, and I don't mean to be silly, but I really enjoyed Good Hair. That opened up a big thing for me. The godmother to my child is African American. She was one of the ladies I interned for. And she always told me that I should learn about Black hair, especially if I wanted to adopt a Black child one day, which is one of my dreams, but I can't take care of my own hair, much less anyone else's hair. Just wanted to say that not getting too much into the Trump era, we all know that, he got elected while we were still in law school. We were all devastated because I think we knew. Being at UDC, we knew how bad things were going to get. We knew he opened a Pandora's box. But the one thing I do have faith in, as much as this country was founded on racism, and it's just been unleashed. It's kind of fashionable now to some people to just, be Karens on the street and say whatever they want to say. I do have faith in this generation. I have faith in the next generation, and the generation in front of that one, that they are going to be more sensitive. Not only to inclusion, but to eradicate racism, sexism, ageism, and to be better people, to be better than the generations left behind.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I appreciate you. Emily, coming from New York City, what would you like to say? I'm living vicariously through your Instagram page. The fashion, the parties, the whole thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just try and live my life in a way that, when I look back 20 years from now, that I can still stand by the decisions that I made. I be an ally to all of my Black friends as much as possible. Anytime I see the cops even just questioning a Black person, I now stand and, wait there and make even just watching them to make sure I don't care what they did, but I'm still going to stand there, so the police have to think twice. And just, I think, little kind of daily habits that you can commit to making a difference and, just being an ally and advocating for other people is, what I strive for. So thank you for having me. I think this is a really great panel. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Rebecca, would you like to say any closing and parting words? Oh, hold on a second. Go ahead. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Just piggybacking. Just to piggyback off what everybody else said, just like you're saying, just be an ally. And I'm in a position where I've got young Hispanic minds. I'm definitely in a position where I can make a difference and teach my kids and the children that I'm teaching in school. And I agree with everything you all have said that, we just need to stand by and watch and make sure that we are doing our part to be allies and to call people out on it, when we see something wrong. And that's, I guess, where I'm at with that is just able to call people out when you see something and stand by and be strong with our convictions about it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I can say a lot of these women, again, the fact that they're still, during the whole Trump thing, we'll talk about that next time. It was a breakdown. I stopped speaking with a lot of people. A lot of people stopped speaking with me. I was very vocal, going back before Freddie Gray. And so the fact that we're still communicating, it says a lot that you guys, there was a lot of disconnecting, I would just say, because I have a big mouth. So I thank you all for being here. I mean, we were getting caught that we'd like to have another show, to bring everyone back. Maybe we can do that in a month or so. If you all are willing to, I'll reach out to you. But thank you all for your time. Thank you for your honesty. This network has programming. We've moved over to blackusa.news from bmorenews.com. We have programming every evening at 7, but I'm definitely going to have these ladies back on again if they don't mind, because we're going to talk a little more about this. It's such a big discussion, and we'll get into more specifics as we plan the next show. So thank you all. Nicole, you want to close us out?
Whew, this was great. It was nice again to meet you all. Mary, if you bring back the program, let me know. I would love to send my husband. He has both dual career, registered nurse, and also he was actually the nurse that when the physician was shot down in Johns Hopkins, pulled him out of the hallway. So, but now he's logistics, so he's dual career. And of course, Jasmine, I didn't get what kind of attorney, what area of practice you work in. I didn't get.
I do primarily right now. I'm taking a lot of just pro bono cases, but
Okay.
my main hustle is personal injury.
Okay.
They're in Virginia, and
I know. I started saying I'm always looking for an attorney.
I'm here.
Gotta keep what? Well, so you can come to Maryland. You can come to
Yeah,
Maryland.
she's licensed in
I'm
Maryland.
licensed in Maryland.
Okay, cool. And nice to meet the rest of you, and definitely just keeping calling it out. I mean, that's the best thing. It's the best thing to do, and definitely just acknowledging that it's there. So it was great to meet you all, and thank you for the work that you are doing. I mean, hey, I applaud it, because I'm here to tell you there's so many people that stand by and just watch things happen. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all for joining us. We're going to end the broadcast now. Have a good evening. Good night, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.